Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar, our product side webinar on how product managers earn decision rights. We'll get started in probably a couple of minutes or so. In the meantime, you can go put into chat where you're dialing in from today. Always good to see where folks are coming from.
Kenny, I learned early in my career if you just even chat your name, um, it's actually a lot easier to ask a question later. And we love
There
to
you
make sure that
go.
these webinars are as interactive as possible because it's not for us, it's really for you.
Got it. Ooh, we got someone from St. Louis. Welcome. Folks from South Africa, from
Hey,
Louisville,
Kate.
Ohio. I don't know if there was a Louisville, Ohio. I thought it was just in Kentucky. Well, welcome from Germany. Lots of folks from the other side of the pond. I love it. And even down in South Africa. Hopefully, it's not too late for the folks in UK, Germany, and South Africa. But if so, thank you for joining in this late hour.
Kenny, I think we can get started.
All right, excellent. Well, welcome everybody. We're going to dive into our webinar on how product managers earn decision rights. We're going to talk about a value risk framework for you to enable and have strategic influence. I guess we'll introduce ourselves. I'll start with the person on the right. I'm Kenny Kranseler, a principal consultant and trainer at Productside. Have been for, I think my anniversary of 7 years is coming up. Prior to that, I was a product manager, product director, VP of products, chief product officer at a lot of places, including places like Amazon, Microsoft. Believe it or not, I started my career in product management at Kentucky Fried Chicken. So welcome everybody. Rina, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Kenny. And hi, everyone. My name is Rina Alexin. I'm the CEO of Productside. Really excited to be here today to talk about how product managers earn decision rights. In my own background, I have held positions at McKinsey, at MetLife, before coming over to Productside and turning us into a transformation partner for product management leaders. And I'm coming today with a perspective as an executive, almost more so than a product person, but excited to be here and coming from Austin, Texas.
All right, so before we dive in, I want to start by welcoming you and give you a little bit of introduction to the product side of the company and the team that's helping drive today's webinar. Um, at Productside, we have a perspective that we know it's hard to be a product manager and really deliver products that people not only use, but actually love in the process of using them. And there's a lot that goes into that. It includes things like aligning stakeholders, figuring out what customers need and how do you fill those needs, even managing some of the endless backlogs and requests you get from some of those stakeholders. We've seen it all. And we are here hopefully to be your outcome-driven product partner where we don't just provide and instruct on solutions with a certain perspective. We make sure that we fit your unique challenges. And part of that is really getting an understanding of how we build complete solutions to help you transform to become product led, including everything from assessing where you are today to building advisory and training products to help you move toward that, and then work with you on the implementation piece. And we really understand that your challenges are unique, and as a result, our solutions for some of the challenges you may face to move and enhance your product team is unique. So we tailor a lot, we customize a lot. And we've got a lot of folks like me who have spent a lot of time and earned a lot of scars from our back from being product managers. And really, as part of that, extend your team and become obsessed with your success. So we're thrilled to have you with us today. We're going to dive in and figure out how we can help your product teams thrive. But before we do so, a couple of points that come in. As Rena mentioned, we really want to keep this session interactive. If questions come up during the session, you can either throw them into chat, put them in the Q&A, that box of Zoom. We'll find a way to get there. And the first question I always get is, can I watch this recording later? The answer to that is a affirmative yes. We will send everybody that attends this webinar a link to the recording after the webinar ends that you can actually share with some of your teammates. And again, during the session, want to hear from you. Again, you can use the Q&A feature to ask questions. I'll be monitoring that throughout as Rina's presenting. And again, don't feel like you have to wait to the end to speak up. If you have questions along the way, I have Afia to help and interrupt Rina if need be. Also, use the chat feature to connect with some of your fellow product managers. You can ask them questions, share your own experiences, or just cheer us and some of the other folks on. It's a good space for you to learn from each other as much as you do from us. So keep the energy up. Don't hold back. Again, this is your chance to get the most out of today's session. And before we dig into today's topic, I just want to take a moment, invite you to connect with us with Productside on LinkedIn. If you use the QR code that's on the screen right now, it'll direct you right there. And our LinkedIn page, it's more than just a place to follow us. It really is a community. And when you join that community, you get a whole bunch of things, including some leadership best practices that hopefully inspire the growth you want in your career. A lot of conversations about the role of product management and some tips on how you can be more impactful as one. And really sort of an opportunity to network with other product professionals who probably share some of the same challenges and goals that you did. Again, scan the QR code. I think we'll probably put a link to it in the chat. Again, we'd love to hear your thoughts, swap ideas, keep the conversation going, even after today's session. So we're going to start work together to build a stronger product management community. And without further ado, I will hand it over to Rina to dive into today's topic.
Great. Thank you so much, Kenny. All right. So assuming that my slides will move forward. Okay. So what are we going to cover today? And I'm the kind of person where I really don't like to, shall I say, bury the lead. So the agenda is kind of going to answer it for us. Our goal is to talk about how to earn decision rights. And I think decision rights are built off of really having a good understanding of how you can create pull in your organization so that you can answer the questions for the company. Are we solving the right problems? Are we managing risk well? And the easiest part, will we have success out in market? Unfortunately, there's no silver bullet or golden bullet when it comes to product management. It is a complicated, really hard job, but I'm hopeful that today I'll be able to break it down and help you understand how executives view decision making in their companies so that you can be a true product leader, even if your title is product manager, product leader in your organization. Kenny, my screen went a little bit funny. Are you still
Ah,
seeing the
I see
whole?
your agenda slide.
Okay, 1 second. Great.
Not
So
yet.
we're going to kick it off first with a poll. And we made this one not select all on purpose. I want you to really think about what problem you're trying to solve for yourself. Specifically, which decision do you feel you have the least influence over? And the categories are business outcomes, the problems to solve, the solution to prioritize, whether at all to launch or end of life. So we're going to leave it up for just a moment.
Okay, we'll give it a couple of seconds for everybody to throw in their response on the poll. Don't be afraid to put your answer in there. And again, it's the one feel you've had the least influence over.
Awesome.
All right,
Okay,
looks
I
like we
think
have
we
a
have a
couple of
good.
strong ones. Here you go. So it looks like business outcomes, which isn't unexpected because I'm not sure a lot of product managers actually have a lot of influence on the business outcomes. A lot of times those are thrown at us.
Mhm.
But also what solution to prioritize. That always that probably comes from a notion of hippos throwing solutions at the product team and saying, "Thou shalt do this." So sometimes that happens. I don't like that one very much.
Great. Well, thank you for participating. I want you to remember which one you selected, but realistically, we're going to go through all of these in this order as well. And so we'll touch on just about every type of decision that a product manager, even if you might not be making that final decision, you should have some influence over. And I'm going to say it maybe now. Uh, a lot of product leaders are also trying to understand what is the role of product management with AI. And the reason why I like this webinar and the content that we're going to kind of go through together today is because what we're talking about here is actually the critical job of product manager to gather context in order to make good decisions. That is the type of, I will say, work that is going to be really difficult for any AI to take over. So this is going to be a very crucial part of anybody thinking about their career moving forward in the age of AI as well. So we're going to kick it off with how to create pull. And I've done some thinking again from my perspective as an executive and working with various product leaders and also leaders in general, so leaders outside of product management. And I find that most executives want to have a good quality decision made from the context of, are we spending time in the right area? And the way to think about that is, are we going to create value from our effort? Like, what is the ROI of what we are doing? And that's why I'm positing that thinking about value and risk is going to be very helpful for product managers because it will help you articulate what kinds of decisions you're making in the terms that executives are also thinking about, in terms of the ROI, in terms of the risk, the execution risk, the uncertainty around that kind of decision. There's a reason why I also put here value first. And I'm going to say it again later in this presentation, because if you're going to think about value or risk, it's almost like a moot point whether or not something is risky or not if there's no value in it to begin with. So that is why I think in the last 5 years, we've really, as product people, switched to talking about business outcomes first. Because without understanding the business outcomes we're trying to drive, we really get lost in this equation. And so if you are a product manager, and again, if you're on this call and you are one, it's okay, you're not alone, that is maybe overwhelmed by a lot of various outputs and not feeling like you're truly driving impact, this is a good place to maybe spend a little time and do some thinking around the value of what you are doing. I'm going to be talking today about the value risk decisions that we as product people need to make in the context of the product management process. And I'm going to lean obviously as product side on our product management process. And so for those of you who are not familiar, here's our product side blueprint. This is a modern way to think about how product decisions get made at top organizations. We're going to be covering context. And by the way, I don't know, Kenny, if you remember this, but when we created this, we spent a lot of time trying to figure out how do we visualize the importance of context because it drives so much about how product is done at organizations, the internal values and strategy, the market environment, the customers and users. We're going to talk about that almost as that like decision point around business outcomes. And then we're going to leverage the key decision areas that already are here that are in these represented by these diamonds, because those are the decision points that a product manager, even if you feel like you don't have the title or the authority, you have the context at the organization to make the best quality decision in these steps. So that's why we're focusing in this framework. Think about value, think about risk, and think about the decisions that you as a product person should be making. Where do you have that space to make it? And so I'm
And
going
those
to launch.
decision points are key because they are a point at which actually the risk goes up because the investment of the enterprise and whatever you're thinking of doing starts to increase as you move from circle to circle, and the decision points say, is it worth us making that investment?
That is such a key point here. There's a number of different ways to manage risk. And to Kenny's point, actually, I think the risk is highest the further left you are because there's a larger uncertainty, but there isn't a cost to it yet until you invest resources. And so, answering whether or not you want to do something, you need to manage that risk further down. Absolutely. And that's exactly how we are going to frame today as well. So, with that, I want to launch one more poll. Um, and that is when you think about outcomes, because many of you did write that business outcomes you feel like you don't have a lot of influence over. Um, what is your biggest roadblock to achieving outcomes? Again, single choice. I know this one's hard. So maybe I could also define these a little if you're maybe struggling. Outcomes in general are unclear, like you do not know what your business is going for. Unclear priorities, you might have multiple outcomes to drive and you don't know which one to focus on. Bogged down by outputs essentially is even though you know what outcomes you're trying to drive, there's so much day-to-day work, fires, requests that you cannot say no to or feel like you can't say no to, that it just prevents you from achieving outcomes. Misaligned stakeholder teams could mean even though you're trying to drive an outcome, you don't have support from your go-to-market teams, or you have, again, part of that incoming requests from various stakeholders. And I am glad at least one person has wrote that they are achieving outcomes.
Someone's succeeding. I like that. Someone's achieving their outcomes. All right, we'll give a couple more seconds for folks to throw in their answers to the poll, and then we'll share the results. All right, I think we're at a quorum here,
Okay.
so we'll share it out. Looks like three things are bubbling up to the top, Arena.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised. I'm glad there's actually a split. So outcomes are unclear. We'll talk about that. Bogged down by outputs, absolutely, and misaligned stakeholder teams. I'm going to talk about all of these. So hopefully we'll solve all of your problems. And I'm rooting for you who said you're achieving outcomes. Fantastic.
Hopefully, we'll get people to push through those roadblocks.
All right. So this is the section where we're going to talk about problems we're solving, but it's really going to lead us there. So there's quite a few slides. So I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey because again, we're still going to start in that context part. And that is the business impact or the business outcome that you're trying to drive. Now I mentioned it, right? If it's not valuable, no one cares how safe it is. So product managers truly have to be ruthless here about understanding the outcomes that they're trying to drive first. Without having a clarity here, it becomes very challenging to start to say no to things that you need to say no to. There tends to be a lot of scope creep as a result, and that is very, very common with product. I think, Kenny, didn't you just do like a full webinar around roles and responsibilities and scope
Yeah, I
creep?
did. We did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Go
the
ahead, Rainy.
the reason why this is so, so important is, and I like to say that there's nobody else at the company except for product who's really thinking about the future of that organization. And I mean that, with all due respect to everybody else in the organization, it's not like nobody wants to think about this. But if you think about the day-to-day of it, like an accountant or somebody in finance, they're worried about accounts receivable, payable. Sales is worried. I don't want to be too caricature here, but like about, cut clients and commissions. Product is the part or like that heartbeat part of the organization who really needs to understand the future. And business outcomes tend to reflect the future of that organization. And so, as a product manager, if you wrote, the business outcomes are unclear, I will say that's your number one job to solve first. Without that clarity, the other problems that we talked about are going to continue to show up day in, day out. You're going to need to have both leadership and stakeholders on your team. And the best way to do that is to rally around what the business has set as the true priorities of the organization. I call these primary customers because until you get your stakeholders who enable execution and the leaders who control the resources on your team, it's going to be very challenging for you to serve your users. That's just a reality. So, getting clarity on the outcome, that's why it's your first job. And why prioritization of outcomes might feel broken or there might be a lack of clarity here. And actually, I'm going to pause here and say there's actually, I hope I'm not confusing you because there's, from my perspective, two levels of prioritization. And I'm talking about the higher level. So I want to be clear about that. I'm not talking about prioritization of specific outputs, but rather prioritization of goals at the top. So I hope that's clear. But why that might feel broken at an organization is a number of reasons. One is in an ideal world, it follows like this, that leaders have clarity and they communicate that. And the communication of those strategic priorities become various company initiatives, these bets, right? We sometimes talk now in bets. And the bets are ranked, and then the team gets the bets and they plan and they translate it into team bets essentially, and then they execute. If there's confusion on the top, it's going to cascade down all the way through. Confusion at the top means confusion at the bottom. So there's a couple reasons why there might be confusion. And I'm going to say one of them is not that the leaders don't know what's important. I actually think more often than not, the reason why there's confusion is because leaders have leadership team meetings where they talk about all this stuff. They talk about it and they don't cascade down that rich context of those leadership team meetings. Kenny, have you ever experienced that?
Yeah, all the time. There are times you hear about the leaders going off on their offsite and going figuring out what the company's strategy is, and usually it comes down is do these two things. Without the context, without the understanding of what's driving, why are we doing those two things? What's the impact of doing those two things? Why are those two things more important than the other 10 things that we were working on currently? So what happens is we start to hold on to those things because we don't know why we should move it, and we don't put the clarity in those things that are coming out of what those leadership objectives, even though they may have got communicated, these are the two things we're doing. If you don't have the understanding, the context for that, you're not able to make the right bets. You're not able to incorporate it into your plans, and you're certainly not able to execute on it. It becomes this game of telephone, right? Where the more people you tell and the further it goes, the less clear the message becomes.
Exactly. So I think that is one point. Kenny, I did see in in the chat, is there an echo when I'm talking?
I don't hear it.
You don't hear it? Okay.
No.
Well, I moved my mic closer, so hopefully that resolved it. But absolutely. So one reason for unclear strategy, I'm just hypothesizing, is not that leaders are not having these leadership team meetings, but rather that this cascade is not happening. And so my recommendation for how do you solve this is to have a true discussion with the right people. So if your strategy is not clear, do not underestimate your access to getting this information. In fact, it is your job to do so. Forget titles. Now, I'm not saying forget some politics. I know it's not always possible to have access to the board at your organization, but identify who is on your wish list of people who might have the answers to these questions and ask them for 15 minutes. Leaders, in my experience, most leaders actually like being asked for their judgment and for their opinions, or not actually their opinions, their thoughts. But come in to that kind of meeting if you get it, or assuming you will get it, with a perspective, with questions. In fact, we have an outcome guided, strategy discussion template in our playbook that I think is going to be really, really useful for something like this. But come with a perspective and talk to a few leaders as well. If you can accomplish this, you'll actually get much more clear on what you need to focus on. And I know it is possible to do because we work with all sorts of organizations. And I've been in rooms where we just bring the executives into the room and pressure test what are the outcomes. They say it. And I've had product managers say, I've learned more about our company strategy in 2 hours than I had 2 years working here. So clearly, communication is an issue. This is step one. So if you said business outcomes, I'm struggling to achieve them because of the lack of clarity, you need to do this.
And this is one where don't be afraid to be bold, right? Reach out, you probably have the ability to either schedule with someone or their administrative assistant or something like that. But also understand that executives, they actually like some of these skip levels. I mean, I know when I was, chief product officer at a couple organizations, hearing from junior product managers or APMs or even junior developers, understanding what, the discussions we were having executive level, I was happy to share some of those. And oftentimes I wasn't communicating effectively, and hearing some of those individual discussions enabled me to be more effective in my communications.
This is a fantastic way, Kenny, for anyone to also gain visibility in their organization. I think product managers have a lot of, I guess, struggle a lot with getting visibility because they are, how do I put this? If you make good decisions, someone else is going to get the credit. Like marketing, great marketing campaign, sales, wow, you were hitting your revenue goals. If it's a bad decision or the execution fails, product often gets the blame. And so by showing up in this way, I also think it's a super great career booster because you're in front of the people and you're showing how you think and how you want to think. So this is gold. Do this, if nothing else in this webinar. Okay. I also want you to also, as a product manager, understand when you get a clarity of what is the business outcome that we want to drive, at the highest level, there is still risk. There's still a good way to get risk. Now, I'm offering Ansoff matrix. Now, Kenny, I know you already have other matrices for risk. There's a lot of these. Pick one that works for you. The goal here is for you to understand what level of risk there is in the decisions that you need to make, because that will help you make sure you plan for it. If you are just entering existing markets with existing products, you probably know a lot more, right? Than if you are trying to go after new markets, even with your existing products. This will help you understand the level of risk in some of those future decisions. And that's why I'm setting it as part of the context because it's really tied, I think, at this level, more on the business outcomes you're trying to drive versus the individual product decisions.
And usually the matrix helps you from this perspective in that by taking on and pushing yourself in toward m- more foreign territory, you are taking on more and more risk, but also the return and the value that gets amplified as well. So you need to push both sides of that.
Earlier in the conversation, I mentioned how risk, sometimes we call, there's various different synonyms with risk. One of them is uncertainty. And so the higher the risk, essentially what we're saying is the more things we don't know, and therefore the more important it is to also structure how you will find out. So structure your bets to be small, efficient ways to sometimes just gather new information. So that's just, again, part of how you understand enough context in order to make good decisions. So we are right here in this little diamond. And the big decision point here is, are we working on the right problems? If we're not working on the right problems, we have not yet enough information to say we should move on to figuring out what is the right solution. That is why in our product side playbook, we talk a lot about the importance of framing the problem. And the reason why I started with the context is the problems that you want to go after should be grounded in the business outcomes you're trying to solve. This is important. So I'm going to say it again. By understanding the business outcomes you're trying to drive, it's easier for you to understand why you want to solve a specific problem for your user and customer. Because that will be not only valuable to your user, it'll also be valuable to your business. In terms of framing the problem, this comes directly from our playbook. These are the questions that you need to solve to truly understand the problem that you are selecting in order to solve for it in the next phase. You need to answer who has the problem, what are they trying to achieve, what frustrates them the most, what truly needs solving, and how does this affect them emotionally? That's part of the essentially the jobs to be done. If this is not clear, then the solution you will end up working on will not be clear. I mean, this is, I think, fundamental product management um, core capability. And so if you cannot answer these questions thoughtfully, then you're not yet ready to move to the next stage. That's essentially what I'm saying here.
Yeah, what I find people doing is they come up with a great solution and they're going, okay, what problems can I go solve this for? And that's backwards, right? You really need to understand with the outcomes that you have, what problems align with those outcomes, and really deeply understand what those problems are, what frustrates people, where it fits in their decision process. That enables you to come up with the truly right solution for the specific problems that your customers have.
Yeah, the way that we often frame this, right, is we figure out the business outcomes first and the product outcomes, and then the that we're trying to drive, and therefore the problems underneath the product outcomes. So having this link through, I mean, I think for those of you who are familiar with outcome tree um, and our playbook, that is, I think, the fundamental carry through. And the next part is once you have the right problems to focus on, and this is why I call this part making risk visible for the reasons that Kenny had said. At this point, you're going to be investing more. So it's not that risk is now suddenly higher or lower, but the business is going to feel more of it because of the investment of additional resources, funding, etc. You need to start making that risk visible in order to enable better execution. So this goes back to, again, we've identified business value, we've identified the user value, so why users would care about it, because we're solving a problem that is important to them that also helps us drive our business outcomes. Now we need to focus also on that risk part of making sure that whatever we do solve will be successful in market. So the question is to answer is, are we solving it the right way? And this is where, depending on what product you're working on, it's going to take a slightly different shape. I mentioned earlier the importance of higher risk items, being able to create tests and testing in small increments. Ideally, this exists for all products. Sometimes it is really hard to test in small increments when you're working with physical products in particular. So it is possible you're not going to be able to always test in the same way that you could if you're working on a software product. But it's almost like that makes this risk assessment even more critical to do and to involve as many stakeholders as possible. In fact, one of the recommendations from our playbook is to make a risk assessment a standing agenda item in your stakeholder meetings. That way you can all be on the same page and also add risks as they arise. Because as a product manager, as an individual, any individual, you're not always going to be thinking about every various category of what could go wrong. So at this point, when you're trying to develop the solution, also develop out the risk assessment tied to whatever solution you're trying to work through. So I guess I'm saying two things. I'm just going to repeat them. One is identify the risks, figure out how to test them to reduce them, but also make sure you talk about it frequently in your stakeholder meetings. Uh, Kenny, I hear you have a good story to share, Tales from the Field, on the importance of doing this kind of work early.
Yeah, early in my career, I was a junior product manager at Kentucky Fried Chicken, and we were trying to introduce a skinless fried chicken product, which seemed like a great idea. I mean, actually, in the test market, the first initial test market we did, it did wonderfully, pushed sales through the roof. But once we dug into it, the key was really understanding the risks we're having. One is it was a whole nother line of chicken, and suddenly you had to manage inventory of not just two chicken products, but now you had three chicken products to manage the inventory of and figure out when to cook them and how to cook them and how to hold them and all those kind of things. It's a big risk for our franchisees. The second one was, turns out when you take the skin off a chicken, it's a really good bacteria layer or bacteria prevention layer. So as a result, you had to cook the chicken quite a lot longer to make sure that there wasn't anything bad getting into the chicken. Didn't just stay at the surface and when you need deep. So we had to figure out how to mitigate and figure out how to reduce the key safety risks we had of serving bad chicken to folks. Either one, it was, too dry by cooking it too long, or on the other side, we didn't get rid of some of the bad bacteria that people would have in eating it. So as a result, we had to expand. We had to figure out lots of different opportunities we could to figure out how to mitigate the risk. We actually wound up changing the whole business proposition behind the product to help mitigate that risk, and change how the product was prepared at the restaurant level, doing more at the factory level before it got to the restaurant than we'd ever done with any product before. And it was all around understanding the risks, assessing the risks, figuring out the impact they had on the business, and then defining how to mitigate some of those.
I love that story, Kenny, because it is a good example of a good segue into this common PM trap. And I'm going to link it. You're going to see it now. So I think we mentioned, I think, Kenny, you even brought it up that sometimes product managers are given a solution. And oftentimes it's a stakeholder or a leader who has an idea. And to your point, Kenny, let's say the idea is we're going to use skinless chicken. They don't know the risks. It just sounds like a good idea. That's not a fully fleshed out idea. However, here's the tough part. It sounds like a good idea. So maybe it was the execution that's all wrong. It wasn't the idea. It's really hard for people who come up with things to also take ownership of them, essentially not understanding the risks involved and the costs involved because ideas are really easy. I mean, they're not, there's hard parts about them too, but just saying something is very different from doing it. And so I do find that there's actually a lot, and I've talked to a lot of product managers and product leaders who have been at some point in this product management trap, at some point in their career. I don't know, Kenny, if you've been in this trap.
Oh, once or twice.
Oh, once or twice, right? There's this
No, many times. Here's a solution. Go figure it out.
go find the
Been
market.
handed lots of hammers trying to find nails, and oftentimes ran into screws instead of nails.
I often see this also in a company, and I know it's ubiquitous, but in PE-backed companies, sometimes the investors have ideas for their portfolio companies. Yeah, well, the problem is that the blame lands on the execution, not the idea, not on the person who said do this. And so, what do you do? So here's three steps, and use parts of it that work for you. But essentially, what we're going to ask you to do as a product manager is if you're given a solution, the answer is not no, I'm not going to do it. Unfortunately, most of the time, that's not something that you can do, especially if it's a senior executive leaders who or like an investor or board member asking you to do it. Instead, what your job here is to truly investigate, almost even though we're at that define or even in some bad places, a create phase of the product management process at this point. I want you to go back into the discover phase. I want you to go as much back as you can to investigate and make those assumptions explicit. Like, what are we assuming about this idea? What are we assuming from an execution standpoint? What are we assuming from a value standpoint, as well? Because what you're really given are opinions, not risks, and you need to reframe those opinions as testable hypotheses. This is the only way to get out of the PM trap is by breaking it down and then going and running this test. Now, I know it sounds like this is a lot of work. I don't have time to do this. You certainly don't have time to build a bad solution either. That is a career dead end, to be quite frank. It is not a good idea. So you make time to take these beliefs, these opinions, these ideas, and do the real product management work and you bring it back to that executive and lay it out. Here are some of the assumptions. Here's what I found out. Is this a good or bad idea? Sometimes you may actually find that this is a wonderful idea. I'm not saying that all the time these are bad things. I'm just saying they're not thought through. And so someone, meaning you, has to go and think it through and reveal what are truly the value points and the risks. Because a lot of times, again, the person thinking about the idea is seeing the value maybe a little high and the risk a little low. And the reality is often flipped. And that's
Right.
what you need to do.
I mean, expose it, find it. You understand the customer, you understand your products, and you understand in many instances the capabilities of the organization to fulfill on those. I mean, there was a time I was at a company that was used to doing enterprise sales. And the board had this great idea to go create a mobile app that was going to reach millions of consumer individual customers. We didn't have the capability to execute on that. So it was a great idea, but I had to lay out the risks and what the capabilities were that created success in that endeavor and make sure that the company understood that we don't have those capabilities today. And here's what it would cost for us to go create those capabilities. Suddenly change the value of that idea.
I feel like I hear these stories all the time. And I always get excited when somebody is able to say no, like, but get the person with the idea to also agree with them that it's just not a good business decision at the time. So thank you, Kenny. This brings us to our next poll. And we're switching gears right now to a next decision point, which has to do with the go-to-market. So this has to do with, let's say we've gotten all the context about what business outcomes we're trying to drive. We understand the problems that we want to solve in order to enable those kinds of business outcomes. We understand the risks associated, and we have reduced the risks around the solution. So we now have a solution to think about. Uh, this is the question. When do you first involve the go-to-market teams?
Yeah, because ultimately solutions can't be successful unless you bring to market effectively. So getting those folks involved early, but not too early. In other words, you have to have some definition behind it, or else you're going to get them spun up before they get there. So figuring out how to bring solutions to market is a key piece of that.
Now, Kenny, what do you say to internal product teams who might think that they don't do go-to-market?
They do go to market, right? If you want to be successful, even with an IT internal based solution, unless your users understand what you're bringing to them, the value it provides to them, an understanding of the problems that it might solve for them, that communication has to happen. Or, you know, the either it won't be adopted if the users have a choice, or if they don't have a choice, which sometimes is the case, they don't adopt it in the right way. So you've got to bring it to them in a way that they have an understanding of how to use it, where to use it, when to use it, and what it does for them. So yeah, even with internal products, don't forget about that your go-to-market. Slightly different. It's not about broad communications, but it is about focused communications around the folks that need to adopt that solution. All right, we'll end this poll and see where we are for this one. The good news here is we've got a whole bunch of folks that are going to go to market, working with their go-to-market teams early. That's fantastic. In terms of working with them during discovery or when you're defining the solution. Make sure they understand it.
There's still a third or more that are only doing go-to-market planning once a solution is in development, and that could still work depending on, what kind of product you are working on. But yeah, this is great news. Um, exactly what we at Productside say that if you are going to launch and you've brought your go-to-market team in when you're trying to just figure out the launch planning, it's most of the time too late. And the reason why is that there's just so much that needs to happen in order to answer the question, are we ready to launch? And a lot similar to how I said earlier, how leaders have these leadership team meetings and they have all this context and they don't always communicate and cascade down the context. The same problem can happen here, where product has a lot of very rich context during the discovery and the solution definition stage of talking to customers and running interviews, where even though the outcome that you're trying to drive is that the entire organization is ready, marketing knows the positioning, sales knows the audience, support prepared, other teams are aligned. And Kenny also reminded me the product is ready as well. Important point. Um,
The precursor to all this, I think, right?
fundamental, product is ready. Uh, a lot of that rich context happens earlier on in some of the earlier decisions that we talked about. And so that is why at Productside, you'll often hear us in webinars and when we're working with our clients to try to break down those silos, especially for those of you who wrote that we don't do go to market. I'm hopeful that you want to do go to market with your products. Um, that in order to break down silos between product and go-to-market teams, and we have many case studies where we've been successful at it, it's really bringing those go-to-market teams along for the journey. You, as product leaders or product people, we rarely ever have direct influence over a sales team's commission, for example. And so, if you are in that category of trying to go after a new market or have a new product, which creates a completely new, potentially completely new sales motion outside of just the marketing plan and channels and distribution and all of the other things that you need to think about, you will not have success out in market if your sales team is not truly enabled and excited about this product. And how can they get excited if all they get is like a one-page memo and a meeting? That's not how you get a person excited. And so that is why when I think about go to market and are we ready as an organization, if you haven't done the work, then even if the sales team knows the audience, if they're not truly excited about this as a go to market, I worry about that product success out of market. Like I worry, are they even gonna, because do they believe that they will, does a salesperson truly believe they're able to sell this product, to answer all of the questions, and to close the sale at the same speed as their other products, and to gain commission on it? Because that is time that they need to switch from something that they know to something they don't know. And that is a risk in the organization. If you're not ready, that does not feel ready. I want to argue, and I know it's not always possible, but I do want to argue that as a product person, it is also your job to call we're not ready and to actually treat this as a go, no go decision. I know it's hard. I know it's not always possible to change dates. I know sometimes that date is aligned with a conference and you have invested all this money and it's hard. I'm recognizing it. But if the organization truly isn't ready and you haven't done that or those early steps and people are not truly excited, you are risking a lot more than you think. Kenny?
Yeah, hitting a date for date's sake will just assure that you're going to be it's going to be a failure at that point. If the organization's not ready, sales isn't ready, if marketing isn't ready, if support isn't ready, you're going to get it out in the marketplace and then find out, oops, there's all these 10 problems. And there's a magic about when you first put a product or a product iteration into the market that you can never recapture the second time you try to do that. So, oops, sales, support wasn't ready. Let's hold off and let's stop after it's out in the marketplace. Get support up to date. Well, you've lost the impact at that point. So make sure in that final diamond there before you launch the product, as Rina mentioned, treat it as a go, no go, right? And if these things aren't aligned, if you don't have the internal team and the product and the marketing all ready for it, just wait until they make sure you do what's needed to get them ready. But if you're not at that point, wait. It's the best thing you can do at that point.
Yeah. I have one more decision point that I really think is on product to own, and it is when you're already out in market. And I want to say this, we've done a lot of research on product side. This is in our skills benchmark report. This is also in our team assessment report, where we find there's consistently low maturity, both in a skill area and a practice area, is on end of life. And I've also been in rooms with product managers who want to end of life something, but feel like they cannot build the case to their leaders to really sunset a product. That also happens. But this is the crucial decision point where I think if you, okay, there's two sides to this. If you can be seen as somebody to make this type of tough call and to build truly good business cases to sunset products, you will be seen as a leader in your organization. I have also seen some product managers who end up forming a career out of being called on to sunset products because sometimes that is seen as a capability as well, where if you do it really, really well, people will want you to do this work for them because this is also very, very hard. I think it's also done oftentimes poorly in organizations. But there's a lot that goes into this kind of decision because it's always easier to not make changes. But again, there's a lot of cost associated to that. There are the obvious ones, the actual cost of supporting products. There's still products out there running on COBOL. Like there's a lot of legacy systems. I'm shocked that's how legacy some organizations are. They just kick the can down the road. So there's parts of the product that might need to be retired, is my point here as well. But assessing the P&L implications are there, but there's also an opportunity cost. We spend so much time supporting these products that we are unable to reallocate resources to our company's future. People make sunsetting products sometimes also emotional. Like our first customer is on this. We're going to kill it for them. We're going to kill part of our brand. But there's also a risk associated with supporting old products and not innovating and not bringing your company to the capability or the future that it could hold. So yes, you need the P&L understanding, the cost of support and maintenance, but you also really need to understand opportunity cost here. Kenny, anything else that you think a product manager needs to do well in order to sunset products effectively?
I, Rena, I think you've hit the key pieces that we tend to underestimate the costs of keeping products going, the cost of sales having to deal with it, the cost of it being inventory, the cost of, particularly in a software and or a hardware environment, maintaining that into our test matrix. Suddenly we got, oh, yeah, there was that old product that one customer is using that now slows down every piece of development we do going forward because it's still sitting out there and we have to test and align for it. That's a big cost. We need to understand it, and you as a product manager need to capture that as you're making the assessment on, should this still be a supported product?
So, thank you. And I'm going to quickly answer the chat question that we received a question in chat. I just want to fit and loss. So it's I don't know if my microphone is changing. Profit and loss. So revenue from a product and the costs of delivering that product. So you want to know that to calculate the profit of that product. So with regards to end of life, we discussed the cost, but in order to really make the decision, we also recommend treating it like a bet. Like there's a problem to be solved here. So take this and go back to our product process to go back to the discovery in order to build the right business case. And I've also heard us talk about this as end of lifing is almost like launching backwards. You also need to have a very thought through launch plan. I don't know why my microphone keeps changing. Do you hear me okay? Okay. Well thought out. You essentially unlaunch your product. Okay. Hopefully it'll stop. All right. So bringing it together, you want to get a seat at the table and have pull at your organization. Understand the value you're generating, driving for the business, understand the risks associated with what you are trying to build, and take ownership of of being the person the company looks to answer some of these questions. Are we targeting the right outcome? Is this worth solving? Are we solving it the right way? Are we prepared, truly prepared to launch and launch successfully? And are we still making the right bets? These represent the decisions a product manager is uniquely positioned to make for and with the company. And doing this well and doing it consistently requires all of the good product work that we're talking about in terms of gathering the right context and knowing what questions to answer at each. So I
All right.
hope, if nothing else, you take some of the advice that we gave around finding the executives to talk to and start putting together true cases and true answers to these kinds of questions. Kenny.
Yeah, so while folks are thinking of questions to ask, I'm going to just cover a couple of coming up events from a product side perspective. So, um, first of all, a bunch of tools that both come out of some of the discussion that Rena's provided today, as well as just a clear understanding of how to build strategy. Scan these two QR codes here for templates around our whole playbook, or if you're targeting what are the outcomes we truly want to have and how do we have impact on those? There's a strategic planning pack that'll enable you to ask the right questions to understand the outcomes that your business needs to have. Also, we've got some training coming up. I think in the middle of April, if you're going to be somewhere in the European continent, we're doing a live and in-person training in London. Sign up now so we can reserve a seat for you for our April 14th cohort. We're going to keep it small, keep it focused, and hopefully learn a lot of what Rina provided today and really build some in-depth understanding around that. But we're not just in London, we're also in a whole bunch of other places too. Also, yeah, there's a whole bunch of other courses coming up in April and May. There's the London one in there, but if you're in the US or don't want to travel into London, we have a live online course starting at the same time. There's also both a live online as well as an in-person training coming up in May, online early May. If you're going to be in the Austin, Texas area, you can have Tom Evans train you for a few days there. And then they even have some training going on in June. If AI is a key need for you in building up your skill base in AI, we've got two online courses coming up, one at the end of April and one in early June, a chance to go in depth on how to both leverage AI as a product manager and also incorporate AI into the products that you build. We do have some other upcoming webinars. One is how do I optimize for the agentic AI? People are starting to build agents, and how do we start to leverage our AI tools as agents that can move forward and create not just one-off answers, but flows that allow us to be more productive as product managers. So I encourage you to click on this one so you can register for that topic. And now we've got like a minute or two to answer some questions. Throw them into the Q&A dialogue or in the chat. One came from Tina, which says, give more examples of some costs of maintaining old products. There's a whole bunch of costs built in here. One is you're going to confuse your customers because they don't know how to make choices. You're going to bog down some of those customers in figuring out what's the right solution for them. But the key one is keeping those old products means that you have to now have inventory for them. If you've got a hardware product, you've got to keep it in your test matrix if you're creating new products. So it slows down everything you do as a result.
Don't forget, if you are still trying to sell that product, it's the marketing budgets, it's the salespeople that you have on it. There's actually a lot of human resources and executive thought behind it. There's a lot of also the personal costs.
Right. All right. Any other questions that have come in? No, I think we've hit the top of the hour though. So without further ado, if you have other questions, go connect to us on LinkedIn and throw them in a chat window in LinkedIn. We will research answers for you, make sure they get back to you. But thank you all for attending, and hopefully you've learned a little bit more in how to build your authority to make decisions in organizations by an understanding of the key processes within them.
Now, go make some good decisions. Thanks, everyone.
Bye bye.